My name is Einat Waizbard. I am a postdoc here at the Autism Center, working with Ilan Dinstin, and I'll be presenting to you today the first project that I'm working on as part of my postdoc, which is called Evaluating Level of Agreement Across Measures for Autism Symptoms. So I'll start off with some things that I'm sure everyone knows. Autism is a neurodevelopmental condition or disorder that is assessed in 1 out of every 36 children in the United States today, according to the latest CDC report. And because we don't have any type of biological way to know who has autism, right? We don't have a genetics test or a blood test that can identify children with autism. What we do is we use standardized measures to look at, to try and identify the presence of core symptoms in a person's behavior. And we look for 2 core symptom domains. So the first are the social communication deficits, and the second are the restricted repetitive behaviors, or the RRBs. So I'll just give a very, very, very quick rundown of the 2 symptom clusters, because I'm sure most of you know them. The first is cluster A. So these are the persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction. And they are comprised of several criteria, which are deficits in social emotional reciprocity, so everything to do with creating this reciprocal social interaction between the child and other people. Atypical nonverbal social behavior, so this includes things like eye contact and body gestures, and deficits in forming and maintaining relationships which are appropriate for developmental age. Wait a minute. A little bit. נדב, כאן זה עובד. הלך? נדב. רגע. Okay, so the second symptom cluster, cluster B, are the restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. And this is a larger group of symptoms, or it's a wider group of symptoms. It includes more types of behaviors. So repetitiveness in motor movements or in use of objects, insistence on sameness is the second criteria, so needing for things to be the same and happen in the same way over and over again. Highly specific areas of interests. And the fourth criteria in this group is an atypical sensory profile. So these are basically children who either seek sensory stimuli or try to avoid it. And this was a very, very quick rundown of the 2 symptom domains. And these 2 core symptom domains vary in their severity level, going from high severity to low severity across different individuals on the spectrum. Now, in order to try and assess the presence of core symptoms in children's behavior, different studies around the world, the biggest studies that evaluate the development of children with autism, they use standardized measures for evaluating core symptoms. So I want us to look at several of these, the most common measures for core symptoms, the gold standard. So the first one is the ADOS. ADOS, I'm sure most of you know it. It's the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. This is an assessment done by a clinician. It's a play-based assessment, and it includes this variety of structured tasks that provide opportunities for the assessor to evaluate whether core symptoms exist in the child's behavior. The second gold standard measure that we use is the ADI. That's the Autism Diagnostic Interview. And this is a very, very comprehensive interview. It takes about 2 to 3 hours, and in which the clinician or the administrator does the interview with the parents, asking and receiving information about the presentation of core symptoms in both present and past times. So this interview involves both, it's based on parent report, but it involves the clinician as well. And the third measure, which is a very common measure for core symptoms used in different studies, is the SRS, which stands for the Social Responsiveness Scale. So this is solely a parent questionnaire. The parent fill out a questionnaire looking at both social communication deficits, even mainly, and also restricted repetitive behaviors, to produce an assessment of core symptoms only based on parent report. So different studies use these different tools interchangeably. When we see a study and we see in the heading that they looked at core autism symptoms, they might have chosen and used either one of these measures, and they do this because of the assumption that they all measure the same construct, which is core autism symptoms. But this assumption has been challenged by the fact that in recent years, more and more studies have been published finding low correlations between how these different measures evaluate symptom severity within the same child. So they're finding gaps. And this leads us to the question, do these measures actually measure the same thing? Or could it be that they're not measuring the exact same construct? And also, how can we best measure autism symptoms if this is the case? So this is kind of the background that led us to the study that I'm going to show you. And we had two questions when we started this study. The first is, what is the level of agreement across different measures for assessing autism symptom severity? So basically, what is the status in the field right now? The tools that we're using, what are they actually showing us? And our second question was, can we use different measures of autism symptoms to create this combined assessment of autism severity? Can we almost use these different measures to try and triangulate between them an overall assessment and symptom severity? So we used actually two samples in this study. A study and an attempted replication, if you will. So our first sample is the APP. This is the Autism Phenome Project. It's a sample that's collected in California in the United States at the Mind Institute. So this is a longitudinal study evaluating the development of children with autism, and we included 384 children from this sample. And our second sample was the Simon Simplex collection, or the SSC. This is a very, very large study. It is collected across 12 different sites in the United States, evaluating children with autism, and we included 331 children. So overall in this study, we had 715 children, all between the ages of 2 to 5. And the reason that we chose this age range is that this is around the time of diagnosis. Usually children are diagnosed somewhere between 2 to 5 initially. So this is the time window where the overlap between different measures is most crucial. Okay, so our first question was, what is the level of agreement between symptom severity levels evaluated by different measures within the same child? And so to do this, we ran a correlation analysis. And I did this study along with Gal O, who is a research assistant at the center. And what you're seeing here are heat maps. These are heat maps for the correlations of the ADOS, the ADI, and the SRS and how they evaluate symptom severity within the same child. On the left is the Autism Phenome Project, our first sample. On the right is the SSC. And you'll also see that the SSC has an additional row, and that is because in this sample, the SRS was not only a parent questionnaire, it's also a teacher questionnaire. So there was also information in this sample about how teachers evaluate social symptom severity. So when we look at these two heat maps, the first thing that pops out is that the patterns are quite similar, right? These are not exactly the same correlations, but we're seeing the same pattern. So when we look at measures that are based on parent report, when we look at the ADI, where parents report children's symptoms, and the SRS, where they fill out the questionnaire about their children, these measures are finding symptom severity to be quite consistent. We're looking at correlations that are medium to medium high. But when we're looking at the ADOS, which is our only measure that is based purely on the clinical observation, we're seeing much lower correlations with the other measures that run from 0.14 to 0.26 at max. So next, we wanted to break it down. We wanted to break down overall symptom severity into its two domains, the social communication and the RRBs. And again, these are two heat maps for the subscales within the measures looking at social communication severity specifically. And we're kind of seeing the same story. So we're seeing that measures that are based on parent report are showing these medium to medium high correlations, while the ADOS is showing much lower correlations with the other measures concerning social communication severity as well. And then last, we looked at the RRBs. And in the RRBs, you might notice that we have an additional row, and that is because we added another measure, a measure that looks purely at children's RRBs. It's called the RBS, the Repetitive Behavior Scale. And this is another measure that is purely based on parent report. And actually having another measure based on parent report lets us see even further the cohesiveness that exists in measures that are based on the parents. So we have, again, medium to medium high correlations in the three measures now that are based on parent report, while when we look at the ADOS, the clinician-based measure, we're seeing that the correlations are even lower compared to the other areas that we looked at. And correlations between the ADOS and the other measures go from 0.02, which is barely anything, to 0.2 at the max. And what you're seeing here in this slide is basically everything that you've seen so far. So this is, again, the same information, but it is compounded into the same heat map, because I wanted you to see these two almost white rectangles that show us the lack of agreement that the ADOS has about symptom severity within the same children as they're evaluated by the other measures. And this lack of agreement that we found pretty much sets the stage for our second research question, which was, can we extract a common factor for symptom severity across all these measures combined? So to do this, we ran a factor analysis. And what you're seeing here is the best factor structure, so the best model that we had for a combined factor in the Autism Phenome Project sample, so in our first sample. In the circle above is the factor that we created, the overall symptom severity factor, based on our three measures down below in the squares, the SRS, the ADI, and the ADOS. And what you see in the arrows and the numbers next to the arrows are the factor loadings. And the factor loadings show us to what degree does each one of our measures give a unique contribution to the combined factor. And just like what we saw in the heat maps, we see that the ADOS is giving a relatively weak contribution to the overall factor structure. So this is our first sample, the APP. And now we did the same type of analysis, the same type of factor analysis in our second sample, in the Simon-Simplex collection. And the best model that we found for the Simon-Simplex collection that fit our data best was not a one-factor model, it was a three-factor model. And this model actually, like you see in the circles, divided symptom severity based on the informant that filled out the questionnaire or gave the information to the measure. So we had three types of symptom severity. Symptom severity based on the teacher, symptom severity based on the parent, and symptom severity based on the clinician. And if you look at the arrows that go between these circles, these are actually the relationships between these three different assessments. And the numbers next to them are standardized. These are correlations. So when we look at the relationship between how the teacher, the parent, and the clinician assess severity, we see that the relationships are really low. And these are independent assessments. So just to summarize, our first question, Sababa, about lack of agreement, about how much agreement exists between the measures, what we found is that different standardized measures for assessing core symptoms differ in how they assess symptom severity based on the informant used. And we found that measures based on parent report tend to go together. They tend to be cohesive, while the ADOS, which was our only clinician-based measure, tended to show different assessments of symptom severity. And then in our second question, when we try to look at a common factor for symptom severity, we find that a common factor may not be representative because it over-relies on the information that we receive from parents. And creating separate factors, not based on measures, but based on the informant that we used in the measure, may be a necessary step in the middle of this process to try and create this overall factor that can be used in both research as a research definition, but also in clinical practice. So when we look forward, we're looking forward to see how can we advance this research, what can we do next. First, we want to really understand what does this disagreement mean? What does a low level of agreement mean between the measures? It could be purely methodological differences. It could be only these differences between informants or even psychometrics of the tool. But differences between these tools might also indicate real differences in reality, in the context of the measurement. It might very well be that children present their autism symptoms differently at the playground at school, where the teacher sees them, or in the home environment, or in the assessment room in an hour with an adult that usually is very attuned to the child, and it's a completely different type of situation. So it might be methodological differences, but it might be that we're actually capturing a real difference in presentation. Second, we are now in the process of fitting what is called a higher order factor model. So we want to take everything that you've seen in our second question and fit it into the same model where we can use these different measures in order to create evaluations of symptom severity based on the informant and then load all these together, maybe equally, into an overall factor of symptom severity. And the last thing that we're doing is that we're looking at age. So everything that you've seen now is our preschool sample. These were children aged 2 to 5. We are taking it one step further now, and we're moving from preschool to school age. At the school age sample, we have thousands of children, and we want to understand whether the lack of agreement between these measures differs as children grow older. So I just want to thank Ilan Dinstein, who is my advisor at the National Center, Emilio Ferrer, my collaborator, everyone here, the team, the funding agencies, and all the families and children that come into the lab and participate in these studies.